Welcome to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday podcast, where we cover anything related to behavior change that will increase your long-term wellness and happiness. And now, here are your hosts, personal trainer and RNs, Matt and Jenna Lane.
Yo, we are back, and I'm so excited for today's episode. But before we dive into it, my name is Matt. I am a personal trainer, a behavioral change specialist, and a registered nurse.
And I'm Jenna, and I'm also a registered nurse.
This is your weekly podcast where we cover anything and everything about behavior change and anything that's going to affect your long-term wellness and happiness. And I'm just so fired up for today's episode. We have a man that has been so close to our heart and along with our journey in finance. And I just can't wait to dive into this. Mr. Andrew Martin.
Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys.
So this podcast is, I want to just bring value. I want this to be a conversation, and that's what this is going to be. Before we dive into the actual subject, we're going to hit you with our gratitude point. Every show, we pick a point for the day of something that we're grateful for. Jenna?
Oh, I wasn't prepared to go first.
I know, I did that intentionally. So these are always spontaneous. It's we have to really reach and figure out what are we happy for, what are we grateful for.
No, I think it's, I think something especially right in front of us right now is to be able to sit down and record our conversations and really dive into what we're thinking about rather than just having these superficial conversations on the couch. We've really dissected what we feel and are talking about them. And it's not just beneficial for those of you who are listening. It's really been beneficial for us too, to really dissect what we're thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And my gratitude point would be, I'm elated that anyone is willing to listen to what we have to say, because I by no means and you by no means know it all. We can sort of observe and report what we've done and what we've learned. And Andrew is a person that's been in our lives, in our finances, personally and business wise. And without him, we would not be where we are.
Absolutely.
My turn?
It's your turn.
Okay. I would say I'm grateful for the friendships. There's more superficial friendships, and then of course there's, real deep friendships like I think that we have. And, it was interesting. I was thinking about on the way over here, we've at least vaguely known each other for years. I think you worked with my sister, right? And then that's how, and then of course y'all being together. Mm-hmm. And so we were just kind of around each other at functions and such. And then y'all became clients and, just throughout the years. It's just interesting, how these kind of things just blossom. And, I don't know about y'all, but there's only so many people in my life that I can say that, you have a very deep, intimate friendship with. And, those are to be cherished. And I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate you. Yeah. Something that I believe, and I know Jenna believes, is that finance is in line with wellness. I truly believe that fitness and financial go hand in hand, and without consistency in both, you will fail. And that's what we've learned from Andrew. I want to dive into a little bit of his history, how he got started and what he got started in, and why he's so passionate about it. And so I guess take it away. Like, how did you get into finance, and tell them like who you are, what you are?
Yeah. So I knew from an early age that I wanted to work for myself and own my own business and do all that. And so I actually, I'm like Matt. I used to be a meathead and spend a lot of time in the gym and do all that and take it very seriously. And so I thought I wanted to own a gym, because that sounds very romantic, right? You get to spend all day in the gym. Yeah. You own your business. What could be better? And so that's what I went to college for, is for business. And so I started actually, as you get deeper into actually looking into how that works, owning a gym, I was like, that's a really dumb idea. I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? The hours you work and the overhead and the upfront costs. And it just, to me, did not make sense. Yep. And so it was kind of like, well, all right, I know I still want to work for myself and own my own business, but now what? And so I roomed with a guy in college that his cousin was in the industry. And so he would come by and we'd go to lunch every now and then and stuff. And so I would just kind of pick his brain about, being in the industry. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. That sounds like something that I would enjoy doing. And so along the same lines of the fitness and owning a gym, Matt, I'm sure you, get joy and pleasure out of helping people achieve their goals, their fitness goals, seeing the results, just like, things like that. And that's really what I think is probably, keeps you going. And then same thing on the financial end. If you can help people, and just like you, Matt, and people's fitness, you can be the difference maker. I mean, you can't make people do things,
Of course.
but you can be the coach and the motivator and the accountability buddy, and and all of that. And kind of the same thing as I view myself very much as a coach, and just helping people in that same regard, and being able to see, just like y'all, being able to see, and again, not everybody kind of follows the program, right? But for the people that do and take it serious, just like with fitness, seeing how far people have come and knowing that whatever small piece, you had a piece in that, and it's kind of that living vicariously anyway. So, being able to help people and be a difference maker in people's lives, and something as important as finance, and then same thing with fitness, Matt, for you, is, very rewarding. And getting to work for yourself, and I've been taking Fridays off for a couple of years now, spending that time with my daughter, and now both of my kids. And it's just, that kind of freedom and stuff of owning your own business, getting to make your own hours and, do that kind of stuff, and having that freedom and being in more control over what you make, versus working a W-2 job or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm about to bust out my fat man rag because, like I said, I just got done with the gym, and it takes me.
That's fine.
Wipe my brow.
That's fine. With every piece of content that we make, I always try to think about, what is the person listening or watching? What are they going to gain from this? What value are they going to get? And when you look at people that are in an authority role, you can't help but put them on a pedestal. What you have taught us is that there was never a magic trick that Andrew told us. It was never like, hey, here's the one secret that nobody realizes. Everything that he taught us is something that was like, oh my God, like that's so basic. Mm-hmm. And it just boiled down to consistently doing it. Is there anything that, and you've been in the financial industry for how long now?
8 years.
8 years. Is there anything you struggle with still to this day when it comes to finance?
And my personal finances?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I think just being a business owner, the struggle is always, you have your personal finances and you have your business finances, mm-hmm. and there's some overlap, but then it's also somewhat separate, right? Mm-hmm. And it's, it's tough. How much do I reinvest into the business? How much do I save and invest for my own retirement, or whatever other, college savings, or, whatever it is, versus, putting back into the business? Because it's one of those, like, well, if I put it back into the business, you don't know how much it's going to make you, so it's like, is that worth it? Or, I can stick it in one of my investments or something like that, and then I have a pretty good idea about how long, how much that's going to make over a certain period of time. So I mean, that's probably one of the things I struggle with is, and I think I work with a lot of business owners, and I think that's always a struggle, is a lot of them focus focus heavily on the business, and blood, sweat, tears, money, everything goes back into the business, and they don't take the time for their personal finances. And then it's very hard for them to take money away from the business to put somewhere else, even if it's in retirement planning,
that makes
retirement
sense.
savings or something
Makes
like that.
sense.
And that sparks a thought, like whether you're dealing with a business owner or somebody that's not a business owner, personal finance, like what is across the board, like maybe the biggest mistake or biggest misconception? Like, can you think of one point or maybe a few points that are just like, man, that's across the board what everyone thinks? Is there anything that comes to mind?
There's several.
Really?
I was just talking to all right, so I'll say this. I was just meeting with a young couple yesterday. I don't think they're 30 yet. They're engaged. They're getting married in November. No kids, none of that. And, they came in, this was their first meeting, and they were talking about, it was just kind of that get to know each other. This is how we work with clients. What do you need us to do for you? This is how we would work with you. Kind of that interview, like, are we right for you? Or are you right for us? Kind of a thing.
Right.
And, typical young couple problems, right? Budgeting and, just getting your finances in order and, investing and saving and, all that typical stuff. And, so we had the discussion. I'm like, okay, well, here's, for what y'all need, here's the fee. And, it's like, well, do you think that, just honestly, do you think that it's worth us paying the fee or just kind of figuring it out on our own and, saving that money? And I forget the name of the study, but I was reading a study the other day, and it showed that, and it was mostly about budgeting, but it was just about financial literacy as well. And the difference between affluent clients and non-affluent clients, and it stated that even, I forget what the percentage, but like 20 or 30% of even affluent clients need help with budgeting and financial literacy.
Yeah.
But then, of course, as you can imagine, younger non-affluent clients are, of course, I don't want to say the worst, but need that help the most. And they said, this is the group that would benefit most from using a financial advisor, even given the fee. And it's interesting that there's a lot of people that I talk to, especially younger, non-affluent people who don't say it this way, but basically, I'm young and not affluent. Why would I need a financial advisor? Okay. You know what I mean? And it's interesting. So like the common misconception is, well, I'm young and I don't have a whole lot of money and things going on. So like, why would I need a financial advisor? I'm not rich. I'm not whatever, and it's like, no, that's exactly, that's
when you need to start.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the point you're making on why you don't need one is exactly the point on why you do, and so I would say that is a very common misconception. There's a ton of, on.
I would bet. Bet.
I mean, we have other little ones, but I would say that's probably a pretty prevalent one.
I was telling her that, I remember the first time you contacted me for financial planning, and we didn't know each other really. We kind of knew each other. Yeah. And I remember feeling offended, and I was like 19. I was 18 or 19. Yeah. And my immediate thought was, who is this? And why is he contacting me? Like, I felt like it was a sales thing. He's a financial advisor. Like, immediately I was like, I don't have the money for a financial advisor. And I looked back at that and I thought about it. That's like saying I don't need a financial advisor until I have money. Like when I get the money, that's when I'll get a financial advisor. That's like saying I'll go get a doctor once I get healthy. I'll go get a personal trainer once I'm in shape. Yeah. It's
a chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I struggled with the same thing on hiring my first assistant, years ago. I was like, well, damn, I don't know if I can afford an assistant. And I talked to a buddy of mine that's been in the industry for twice as long as I have and does it very successfully. And he said 6 months into it, and this is a very hard industry to get your start in. Your first year, I mean, your first couple years, but certainly first year.
Sure.
You're really struggling and things like that. But
you think that's because it's not a sexy topic? It's not alluring?
I think it's because it's your first year, and rightfully so. Okay. I think a lot of people are like, well, is this person going to stick around and continue to do this past that first year? Because it's a big attrition rate. It's like 80-something% of people don't make it past the first year, and so, and then also they're like, you've been doing it for 6 months. How, very, maybe more than I do, but maybe not.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Anyways, he said 6 months into it, he hired his first assistant. And he was like, I didn't know how I was going to pay myself, much less somebody else, but I did it and made it, and now look at him. I mean, he's making, a couple $1 million a year and does very well for himself. And, and he's not even 40. So, it's just one of those things that you got to kind of, make the jump and it all kind of works out. I forgot the question now.
I was just sitting here thinking the same thing.
No, it wasn't really a question. It was just confirming about how, how you get a financial advisor when you get the money. It doesn't make sense.
Oh, right. The chicken or the egg thing. Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting to me because, professional athletes still use coaches and they still do the basics every day. And so, even affluent people need to do the basic budgeting stuff and just the basics.
Yeah.
And, same thing with health and nutrition. I mean, it comes down to very basic things. You need to, get your heart rate up every day. You need to eat well. You need to do certain things. And it's just interesting to me. There's people that, again, back to, well, why do I, professional football players, they still do footwork drills every day.
Yeah.
They have a strength and conditioning coach. They have a position coach. They have somebody that, some of them hire people whose sole purpose is to stretch them. They have a stretching specialist coach person, they have nutritionists, they have everything. And, a lot of people would say, well, that's a professional athlete. Surely they know what workouts to do. Surely they know what drills to do. Why are they paying for a coach? That's why they're a professional athlete. I mean, it's you hire professionals that have specialties and things to help you with stuff. So it's just, same thing with personal trainer. People are like, I can go to the gym and work out. I know what to do, Well, but do you really? There's more of an art to it, more of a science, and I think I think And diet is one of those things, especially that there's and everybody's body type is different and everything else. But that's one of those things that really, you probably, if you don't really know what you're doing, you probably need a professional to, kind of put you out a plan. And again, you have to follow it just like anything else. But,
well, and it's like you just said, like there's basic pieces that when you implement consistency, that's where you make progress. Yes, there's a science to it. And then I think there's also an accountability piece to it. So I may know all the science, like you have taught us the basic science of finance, but there is a level of accountability that if you're not here, it's just different. Like we know there's a plan and we keep coming back to the plan, sure, but we have a financial advisor or a trainer that's there for that accountability piece. So when I'm sitting up late at night and I'm like, well, should I do this with my money or should I save this or should I do this? There's that financial advisor. It's like, no, let's stick to the basics like we said.
And you can bounce it off. You can bounce it off me or whoever your person is, you know, and I've had clients before that's like, we were going to do this, but then I was like, Andrew's going to get onto us for that,
or whatever. And that's fantastic.
Like we were, we know we were meeting with you and we hadn't got this done yet. So we got it done, before we met with you or whatever. So, it's like accountability, like you said, that, somebody holding you accountable. And, that's one of the Vanguard did a study, I don't know, about a year or so ago that shows that, so it's interesting. Vanguard has pioneered the way in low cost index investing, very ultra uber low cost.
Which to anyone that doesn't know, what's like an index fund? What is that?
So it's passively invested. So that just means
stock market stuff, right?
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. So like stocks or bonds or, a mixture of the two or whatever it is. But, a popular one is the S&P 500 index. So in other words, this index fund is just buying all the stocks in the S&P 500 index, and it will track exactly what the S&P 500 index does. Okay. So, and there's indexes for everything, all kinds of stuff. But point is, they have pioneered the way in uber ultra low cost index investing. And so, there's become this kind of thought that people have that like, well, why would I pay a financial advisor to do anything when I can just put it in this, index fund and pay ultra? Why am I paying them? I can pay ultra low fee and it's just going to track the index and do whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think the reason Vanguard did this study is because that doesn't remove the emotional, the human errors, right?
Yeah.
The human error mistakes in investing that people make. Like, sure, you can plug it into an index and do just fine and pay super low fees, but it still doesn't keep you from making some potentially easily avoidable mistakes. And so I think that's the reason Vanguard did this study. And the study shows that by using a good financial advisor, it adds an average of 300 basis points of alpha, which just means an average of 3% higher return per year, even after the advisor's fee. Not by the advisor outperforming the market, because that's very hard to do, but it's the behavioral and financial coaching.
So literally just having that financial advisor gives you a potential 3% better earning per year.
That's what the study showed. And again, it's just because of the coaching, not by outperforming the market with whatever, investing philosophies that we have, because again, beating the market is hard, but keeping people from getting overly greedy, right? I have a client that, anyways, I'm not going to get into it, but, keeping people from getting overly greedy and making, potentially stupid investment mistakes, trying to chase, returns and trying to make a quick buck or whatever it is, but also keeping people from being overly fearful. And if the market goes down, they want to, some people like, oh, I'm pulling everything out. I want to, it's like, no, so just having somebody that helps you. In the study, it says, basically root out your goals, find efficient ways to achieve those goals. And then kind of most importantly is keeping you on track. So again, that coaching and accountability kind of a thing, so, again, I just thought that was interesting and I think that's why they did the studies. There's so many people I'll talk to them and I'll give them a recommendation. And so there's actually a client that we did a financial plan for and made a recommendation for part of, they have all kinds of money in cash. I mean, just tons of money in the bank and they're young and they're good savers and everything. And so I gave her a recommendation for part of it based on their goals that we talked about. And, the husband's like, well, why wouldn't I just put that in S&P 500 index fund? And I'm like, we're looking for a more efficient use of cash. And based on what you want to do, that I would have recommended that if I thought that was but that's just everybody's go-to answer. I'm going to
invest it. I'm using air quotes. I'm going to invest it.
Yeah. Well, and it's always the S&P 500 index fund. Okay. That's always people's default. It's like, well, why would I do that? I just plug it in an S&P 500 index fund. Well, why haven't you done that? Why have you had $300,000 sitting in cash this whole time? You know what I mean? Like, why haven't you done that then? And it's, do you realize how much risk you have and what people don't, and then this is getting too much in the weeds, but I'm just going to say this real quick. But people don't understand, like the S&P 500 index is not weighted. So what that is 500 of some of the largest U.S. companies, stocks of the companies, right? And so most companies, almost all of them you've heard of and stuff like that. And so, but they don't weight the companies equally. So in other words, you don't have 1/5% of each company, it's weighted by market cap. So there's like 20 something percent. So there's like 5 companies or something, the big companies, like Microsoft and Apple and things like that make up, there's like 5 of the biggest companies that make up like 20 something percent of that index. And there's 500 companies in there. So it's overly weighted. If one of those companies or a couple of those companies were to suffer for whatever reason, the entire S&P 500 index would suffer. And then also you're investing 100%. If all your money's in the S&P 500 index, it's diversified among that asset class, but it's all 100% large cap U.S. stocks. You have no mid cap in there. You have no small cap in there. It's not sector specific. You don't have any, there's no bonds, nothing safer. It's 100% stocks. You have no international or emerging markets. Anyways,
and this is why we come to you.
Wow. Yes. It's crazy to me that's always everybody's default answer now is they're like, oh, I'm just going to put in an S&P 500 index fund. I'm like, don't, like that's just, I mean, just don't be so lazy about it. Just, that can't be the answer to all of your money is to just plug it in S&P 500 index fund. Anyways, that's getting too much into the weeds.
But it serves the point that why we need a financial advisor, because I think that's easy to understand is just to put your money there because it's popular, but it's not the best.
It's interesting to me. You mentioned like popular. And so I'll meet with some clients sometimes and they say, oh, well, what does everybody else do?
Really?
Like, oh my gosh. Yeah. That is a very common question. Well, what do most people do? What does everybody else do? Well, screw what everybody else does because everybody else don't have their, they don't know what they're doing any more than you do. So, I mean, do you really want to, or do you want to know what rich people do? Isn't that the question? Mm-hmm. What do financially well-off people do? Because I want to do what they do.
Right.
It's just, anyways, it's interesting to me. I'm more venting than anything right now.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, well.
So if you were to break it down to a couple main points for our audience as far as how to get started with their finances, working towards, getting their finances in order. Is there a couple of common points that you would?
Like if you could only give like 3 points to somebody that's just starting out. And 3 points.
Habits. So just like with fitness.
I love it.
Habits. So it's interesting because I have clients that income matters. I'm not going to say that income doesn't matter, but it matters much less than habits. So like I have a client who's 30. She's a teacher. So it's not like she makes a whole lot of money. You know what I mean? she's got $50,000 in the bank after paying cash for a car, and she saves $1,200 to $1,500 a month. Now she's single, no kids, you know, all of that.
Sure.
But she makes, I don't know, maybe $40,000 a year, and she you know, saves like that. You know, she's very diligent about it. And then I also have clients that make $200,000 a year. And one of my first meetings with them, we were talking about, you know, emergency fund and such. And I say, well, you know, what's your emergency fund like? I mean, you know, are y'all doing pretty good there? Or how much do y'all have in savings? Oh, nothing. By nothing, do you mean like very little, like, you know, a couple thousand or something like that? No, nothing. Less than 1,000, you know? And they're like, no, nothing. And I'm thinking, how, you know, you're making, you know,
so
what
it's
are you
not,
doing?
So it's not about what you make.
It's less about what you make. I mean, obviously more income gives you more disposable, you know, and so habits, discipline, you know, and so, you know, younger people, especially if you can set good habits early and follow them, it's a lot easier than when I'm meeting with people, you know, later on and they've, you know, created these bad habits over decades and, you know, it's the whole teaching old dogs new tricks kind of a thing. And so they're hard to break. So habits is very important. Having a good financial foundation. So just simple everyday things that are often overlooked or people think are less important than investing or whatever else. So just simple things like emergency fund, like various insurances, obviously property casualty insurance, disability insurance, life insurance.
And an emergency fund is?
An emergency fund is money that's just sitting there that you're not worried about how much money it's making. Now, I mean, there's high yield savings accounts that are getting, you know, maybe 2.5%, which is nothing super sexy, but it's better than 0.02% that maybe you're getting in the bank. But point is that it's money just sitting there that if crap hits the fan, somebody goes without a job, big unexpected medical bill or any other thing. Now, it's not an emergency/vacation fund, right? You know, or emergency/boat fund or anything. I mean, it's strictly, you know, it's strictly if crap hits the fan. But I mean, so the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. Okay. So obviously closer to 6 months if you can do that. But, but again, that whole point of, you know, and some people only keep, you know, very minimal money in the bank and then they invest everything. And that's great. But then what do you do if an emergency happens? You don't have enough in the emergency fund. You have to pull money out of retirement accounts and pay taxes and penalties to the tune of maybe over 30% on the early withdrawal. You know, I mean, it's 10% for the early withdrawal, but then if you have to pay taxes on it or whatever tax bracket again. So, you know, 30+% maybe after it's all said and done to access that money early because you didn't keep enough money in the bank. So, anyways, various insurances, emergency fund, estate planning like will and powers of attorney and things like that. And so
a foundation.
That's your financial foundation. Just have those. And it's not just easy enough to say, oh, I have that. Like, oh, I have an emergency fund. Okay, well, how many months worth of, I don't know, 1 month. Well, that's not an emergency fund. Yeah. You know, or, oh, I have life insurance. How much do you have? I have $50,000 through work. How far is that going to get you if you die? Yeah. Right. You got a wife and 2 kids, you know, what does $50,000 do? It buries you and what else? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you know, so you want to have, it's not just good enough to say you have them. I want people to put, you know, and I meet with people, just on the life insurance. I meet with people sometimes and they're like, oh, I have a $250,000 or $500,000 life insurance. And I say, oh, how do you reach that number? I don't know. I mean, it just, you know, it's a nice round number, I guess. It sounded like enough. And all I just want people to do is to put thought into why do you have what you have?
There you go.
That's it. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's not enough, whatever it is. But just think it through. I mean, really think it through. And so that's my job too, is like, well, I was thinking about that on the way here. So I was thinking about, you know, when my kids get older, you know, Maddie will be 4 later on this month, my daughter. And, you know, when she gets old enough to understand these things, and I don't know when that will be, but she's going to have her own money from an early age that she's worked for, and she needs to understand taxes. She needs to understand tithing or charity, and she needs to understand saving. So she's only going to get 50% of whatever she makes. 20% is going to go to taxes in the form of me, you know, and that will go, I like that. Yeah, that will go towards college savings or something like that, right? But I mean, you know, part of it goes to me. 10% of it can go towards tithing or charity or, you know, just helping somebody. You know, if she knows somebody that she goes to school with that, you know, needs a new backpack, you know, whatever it is, I don't know. And then 20% savings. And so, you know, she needs to understand all those things. Like, yeah, you might have made $10 doing whatever it is that you did for somebody, but you don't get to keep $10.
Right.
You get to keep $5.
And I think that's where you were talking about, where those habits come into play. That's it right there.
Yeah.
Viewing it as $10 when it's really not $10. I think allotting it, I know that 20% of that is going to go to taxes, and I'm going to, that's just those habit pieces. So, and like you said in the beginning, habits foundation, like, is there another piece, or do you think those are the top two?
I think those are the top two. Habits probably being most important of everything. Financial foundation, that just kind of goes into basic financial literacy and basic financial planning 101.
Yeah.
And then I would say, and look, I know I'm partial, and I'm not saying it has to be me, because you should interview financial advisors, and multiple, meet with 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. And because not only should this person obviously know what they're talking about, and you want to make sure that y'all jive, because this is a relationship.
That's a good point.
So if you don't get along, if people are like, well, I have a annual review with Andrew, I hate that son of a, I don't want he annoys the crap out of me or something like that. Like, you should want to go see, your whatever.
Well, and I know that somebody would make the point, well, what if I can't afford a financial advisor? Like, what would you do then?
So back to when I hired my first assistant. So I was sitting there, somebody in the industry that I respect a lot. I'm sitting there in my office and filling out paperwork, because I didn't have an assistant at the time. And he walks in, he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I very proudly was like, "I'm filling out paperwork. You know what I mean? I'm making money. That's what this is." And he's like, "Well, why are you doing that?" I'm like, "Well, that's a dumb question. How else is this supposed to get done?" And he's like, he said, "Andrew, do you make more than $15 an hour?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, why are you doing $15 an hour work?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, if you hired somebody, if you make, let's just make, nice round numbers. If you make $100 an hour, why are you doing $15 an hour work? If you can pay somebody $15 an hour to do this work, and that frees you up to do work that you can make $100 an hour doing, you're $85 ahead." Right. So kind of that same thing. And, there's some people, like, I had a young girl that came to me, her mom, I guess, referred her to me, or anyway. So, and she was not in the position, I just, whatever her situation was, I was like, "Here's what you need to do. It's going to take you probably a couple years to do this. When you get there, call me."
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So you think there's like basic steps, and what you just said, you think those basic steps, if you literally can't afford a financial advisor, the basic steps that you talked about, as far as start looking at your habits, knowing what's coming in, what's going out, and starting a foundation such as an emergency fund, do you think those are the beginning pieces to being able to get to a financial advisor?
I think those are the must, regardless of if you use a financial advisor or not. Those are a must. And I will say, if you go meet with a financial advisor, hopefully they'll tell you and be honest with you, like, "Yeah, you know what? Like I told that girl, like, you're not in the spot to need me. You do these things, call me when you complete these, and we'll, it'll probably be a couple of years, and then we'll, but again, it just back to the, assistant thing. It was kind of one of those things, like, I don't think I can afford an assistant. But then when I looked at it as, well, it's going to cost me money, but it's ultimately going to make me money.
Right.
So again, efficiency of the dollar, if you're making, and like I was telling that young couple that asked me that question, like, "Hey, do you think we should, hire you, or just try to figure it out ourselves?" And I was like, "Look, people say that, you can afford to make mistakes while you're young. And that is true, because you have time to make up for it, but it also costs you a lot more making these decisions while you're young. Like, if you made a costly mistake that cost you $10,000 right now, what's $10,000 invested over the next 30 or 40 years? So you lost $10,000 now, but the opportunity cost of those $10,000 could have been 60, 70, 80, $1,000 invested over the next 30, 40 years. You know what I'm saying? So no, it actually cost you, I don't know, $60,000, $80,000, whatever it was.
It's a good way to look at it.
So kind of that same thing is, there's a lot of people that make very easily avoidable mistakes. And I couldn't tell you, even young people come see me, they're 30-ish or something, like, "Yeah, I made a really lot of, I made a lot of stupid, mistakes with my money when I was young, and just was foolish or whatever. And it cost me a lot of money. And, now I want to get serious about it." And I'm like, if you would have used somebody back then, or had somebody that maybe could have, what kind of position would you be in? Now you're kind of starting from scratch, because I'll give you an example. This guy was a welder, and so welders, can make pretty good money nowadays. And so, a lot of these guys, they don't have to go to college, and so they're making great money at 19, 20, 21, you know, and so you can imagine young guys, especially making good money. You know, they're blowing it on all kinds of stuff on trucks, too expensive trucks and this, that, and the other, and,
Right.
you know, going out to bars and, you know, whatever it is they're doing. But I'm like, you know, the opportunity cost of that money, you know, I mean, how much did it actually cost you? You blew over the last 10 years, you know, $100,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's, you know, and then that $100,000 invested over the next 30 years by the time you retire. I mean, my goodness, you know, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but, boy, that's a long-winded way to say. Yeah, I mean, again, there are some people that truly just do not need at this point a financial advisor for whatever the situation is. And that's why I would say, you know, most financial advisors offer free consultations, go meet with a handful. You should interview them. And if nothing else, see, well, this is the person that I plan on using when that time comes. And hopefully they'll tell you, yeah, here's some things you should do or whatever.
And so that's ultimately the question. Like, you think that there's and I don't know, is there financial advisors that will give you some sort of basic plan, say, hey, work on this and then come back?
There should be. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
there are, you know, cause I mean, like, you know, that's what I did with that girl. Like, no, I mean, you know, cause she came to me and she wanted to invest, and, you know, she had, you know, some credit card debt and a personal loan,
Yep.
and she didn't have a good emergency savings, and, you know, this, that, and the other. And I was like, no. Here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
You know, let's get rid of this debt. Get your emergency savings up. Here's your goal for those. Whenever you get those where they need to be, you know, call me, and then we'll have that discussion. And based on, you know, it might be 2 or 3 years for her, you know, and that's fine because she's, you know, but anyway, so yeah, and I mean, you know, hopefully there's people out there that'll, you know, shoot you straight and tell you that.
I hope so.
Yep.
Is there? Sorry, I can't read our script.
Even with your glasses.
She's reading off her script there.
Is there something that you wish someone would have told you starting out in this business that maybe would have gotten you farther ahead or faster or set you on a better course sooner?
From the perspective of personal finance, having learned all you've learned in finance, like, what is something you wish someone would have told you with your personal finances?
All right, so I have amazing parents. We're very close, you know. My sister and I both are very close with them. We talk to them every day, at least on the phone or something, you know. And every weekend we see them and everything else. And so, and they love us so much. I mean, you know, even when I played football in Arkansas, they made every 8-hour drive. They would drive up on Saturday for the game, watch the game, spend the night, turn around and make an 8-hour drive back Sunday.
That's
you know,
love.
after spending some time with me Sunday morning, you know what I mean? They'd go and drive back. And so, in every away game that wasn't further away, you know, I mean, that's just one example of, you know, an infinite amount. But I say all that to say, I wish that somebody from an early age would have taught me about money. And I think most people feel that way, that their parents or somebody, you know, at least in school or something, but ideally their parents. And so again, that was a thought that I was having on the way over here. I was like, you know, when Maddie starts getting older and dealing with her own money, and so like when she becomes an adult, you know, and starts, you know, doing things on her own, I don't want to be the parent to tell, you know, I have some clients that come in and their parents are involved with their financial, and she's like, yeah, you know, my parents made me, you know, my dad told me to do this or do this, and they don't know why they're doing it. They're just doing it because dad told me or whoever. And so I was just thinking about, you know, like we have a trust set up, you know, for the kids to where if something happens to me and my wife, all the money goes into the trust. And, you know, I have it, you know, everything very detailed. And so kind of the same thing, like when Maddie gets older, you know, starts doing things, I want to ask questions to get her to come to her conclusions. You know what I mean? Of like, you know, so on the trust thing, they have kids. All right. And like, oh, well, we have, you know, plenty of life insurance. We have this or that. And I'm like, okay, well, what happens if something happens to you and your husband? Where's the money go? Oh, I don't know. You know, and just ask the leading questions to get her to, oh, how do I make sure that my kids get the money in the right way and they don't just get it all when they're 18 and they don't, you know, whatever else. And so and I just was like kind of playing this in my head and be like, well, go do some research on and find out about how you can do that. Because I want her to take the time to do it herself instead of just saying, no, you need to do this. You need to do this. So to answer your question, I wish somebody would have done something more like that with me when I was younger, because I'm the kind of person, and it's a character flaw, it's a personality flaw, but like I can't be told to do something. It has to be my own idea, so if somebody would have, put it in a way where I was like, oh yeah, no, I need to do that.
Think intentionally on money education.
Yeah. And I mean, since Dad had me cutting the grass since I was 7 years old. He was like, that's what I had you for. And he never paid me for it. It's just what but I mean, since I was, I don't know, probably 12, I would go around, and cut people's yards or do whatever for money. And of course you just spend it on whatever, but I wish somebody would have just taught me about, saving or investing or just some sort of basic money management. So maybe that's not, a direct answer to the question, but I wish somebody from an early age would have done something more like that, because I've been like most people to where I do this for a living and I learned it, in studying and how to be a good financial advisor. But, some things, again, you just kind of learn the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, as we wrap up, I'm putting you on the spot. If you could only give one piece of advice when it comes to finance in your life, so for me, when it comes to fitness, I feel that like behavior change and all that, really consistency is the most important piece in all facets of mental fitness, of nutrition, of physical training. It boils down to consistency.
Because you get these fad diets and things like that. That's an example. And, people just like, I'm on this diet for 30 days or whatever it is. I'm like, well, that's not, If
somebody said to me, what's the most important thing I can do? I would just say to be consistent with that. So when it comes to money, when it comes to personal finance, what do you think that is?
Probably consistency.
There you go.
And habits and mindset. So habits, consistency probably go hand in hand.
Sure.
But also mindset, and just kind of in line, but also kind of an aside. Reading. I wish more people read.
Education. I love it.
Yeah,
yes.
And it doesn't even have to be, one of the best books I've ever read has nothing to do with necessarily with finances or anything else, but I think everybody should read it just for life in general. It's The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And just an amazing, just a mindset of, and it goes into Stoicism. It talks about Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and, those guys that were, kind of philosophers or, whatever it was, but some really deep, Stoic, look at an obstacle as an opportunity to make yourself better, not as an impediment.
I love that.
Yeah. Go through the obstacle, not around it.
I love that.
And so he gives a fable, and it was like an ancient Roman king or something. I don't know who it was, but he gave an example. It might've just been a fable or something, but, the king put a bag of gold coins, under a big rock in the middle of the road. And so, it impeded the way. You had to find a way to go around it. And so several people came up and just, kind of looked and tried to find a way around it. Some people tried to move it and gave up. And so one guy, came and tried to move it and ended up, finding a fulcrum and, ended up moving it and he found the money. And then in the bag, it was there was a note or something that was like, something along the lines of the obstacle is the way, don't just, if you find an obstacle, find a way to go through it. Every obstacle is an opportunity to make yourself better. And it was just an amazing book. And I think just in life, because life is full of obstacles every single day. Getting out of bed, for some people, going to the gym, that's dieting, getting, being consistent with your finances, whatever it is at work, family, everything else. There's always impediments or things that you feel like, oh my gosh, this is, keeping me from getting better or growing or whatever it is. I'm like, no. And so, I've had multiple things in my practice, in my business that I'm like, oh, this sucks, like, this is bad. And, every time, I just keep pushing, and, you got to push harder than other times, sometimes. And, you come out of the other end fine, and you end up being stronger because of it, and I'm like, wow, that made me ultimately better. Like, that sucked to go through, but it put me in a better spot ultimately. Yeah. And so, I mean, you can relay that to anything. And, it's kind of a personal recession, if you want to call it that. So back to the stock market, every recession, every time the stock market goes down, it always comes back up further than it ever went down. So kind of the same thing is.
Ooh, I like that translation. I like that a lot.
Yeah. But, kind of the same thing is, you're going to have those times in life that, and my pastor one time, made the analogy or metaphor. I don't know what you call it, but
one of those.
Yeah, one of those. Where he was talking about, sometimes you have to prune the limbs off of, if you have a garden, it makes sense to prune. And it's like, it hurts the plant, but it makes it grow better, after you prune off, whatever the things are. But, and so sometimes it hurts to, cut things out of your life or do whatever it is, but ultimately it's going to make you better. And so I don't even remember the question now, but anyways.
Whatever it was, I like your answer.
Yes, agreed. I love that. How you said that as far as the recession, you always come back. You dip down, but you always come back higher because of that's. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, seriously, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. Yeah. It's an honor to actually have you on. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, we will talk to you guys next week. Thank you for tuning in. Please go leave a review on iTunes. We really, really appreciate it. After 8 weeks of the start of this podcast, up until the 8 weeks, every review that comes in, I'm going to send you a t-shirt. Just email me at MattLaneFitness@gmail.com. Let me know you left a review. I'll look it up, and then I will get a shirt to you for free. We appreciate you guys so much. We'll talk to you next week.
This has been the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. We want to thank you for listening and invite you to subscribe to the show as well. And follow Matt Lane Fitness on YouTube. Until next time, you don't have to be perfect. Just be better than yesterday every day.